Hi everyone, it's Sten here. Welcome back to the School of Light. Well, today is I think the third video in our series on LEDs. In the first video we took a look at normal LEDs and then we made a little tool with them, but today we are focusing mainly on RGB LED strip. Now there are normal RGB LEDs as we saw in the first video, but today we're going to talk about RGB LEDs. We're going to take a look at how to power them, control them, different types of RGB LEDs, and potentially in this cut of the video, but definitely at some point, but we're going to actually make a tool using RGB strip. So RGB LEDs, well, it's a very, very different landscape to when I first started using RGB LEDs. Now, I haven't gone and found the image yet, but the very first time I'm reminded that I made an RGB tool was quite simply I found the longest strip I could find. I attached it to a long piece of aluminium and I went out and waved it around, and it was hilarious. And then what I did, the very first liquid light image I ever made is I took an RGB strip, got a long length of it, up the middle of a diffused white bit of hose, put a controller into this waterproof thing that I built and went down to Lake Bonnie and I waved it around in the water. It lasted about 20 minutes, but I got some great images. So let's get into it. Look, RGB strip is really straightforward. It is fundamentally little chips on a strip, and each of those chips can make RGB light. And there's several different types of RGB strip. So we're going to go through those, but I want to talk to you about the three key elements of these things. The first one is how we power these devices. Now, of course, the context of this video is for light painting, so we want to be able to move the tool around, which means we don't want to attach it to power. Now, when you generally buy RGB strip for the use in the home, it comes with a power supply, which supplies the right voltage. You plug it into the wall and you control your strip. Because we want to be moving around with it, it makes it a little more complicated, but only a little bit. So there are a few different ways to power RGB strip for the purpose of light painting, but we'll get into that in the next phase because it's also connected to how we control RGB strip. So there's a few different ways. So this is a pretty early RGB strip that I had, and there's a few interesting things. So the first thing to note, this RGB strip here is 12 volts, right? Now there's some other things to note with this. See, the chips are quite a way apart and it requires 12 volts to run it. So what I've done is I've got three 18650s in a pack that you can buy. You plug it in and there we go. There's our RGB strip right there. And then in line, it's got an inline controller. So on here, we can adjust, by pressing these buttons, we can adjust the color. We can adjust the brightness, the speed of different things, and we can adjust modes. So there we are, press that and we get some crazy mode out of it. I have a lot of this stuff. I tend not to use it anymore because there's another type of RGB strip, and that's this stuff. I think it's called 2812 or 2811. I'll find out and I'll put it on the screen. But the difference between these two may be quite obvious, and that is that this one here has 144 LEDs a meter, and this one a lot less. The other big difference between these is that the one with the black back on it, these are really smart. They are addressable, and what that means is that you can, using some very clever smarts that we're about to go into, you can tell each RGB chip down the line of the strip to do different things independently of the others, and that's really clever, and that's where the next way that we start to control these things comes in. And they are, so there's this way here, so this is another inline controller and it's connected to this thing, a remote. Now there are other types of remotes that work on infrared, but these ones here, I'm just going to plug this in. Now these strips require 5 volts to operate. Now you are not going to be able to see this, and I'll tell you what, the hilarious thing is I'm a bit blind, and I don't always make a note of the strips. So I have this thing I don't always make a note of the strips when I put them in bags, but these ones and most RGB strips run off 5 volts. And it's just written on the strip here like that. So I'm just gonna, let's not muck around, I'm just gonna plug this in. So you plug it in line, this controller, and then you put some power on it, and because it's weirdly, right, and I didn't even know, you can go and discover this yourself, but for some reason, a 3.7 volt 650 battery runs a 5 volt strip, which is just awesome, and we'll talk about why. So I'm going to plug this in, and there we go, look at that. There we are, look at that. Now how dense, this is the thing, look how dense these are. So they are very, very, very densely packed on the strip, and you can see how that's scrolling through. And then using the controller, I can change the color. So I'm going to make it one color, orange, blue, red, and so on and so forth. And so we can change the color. I can put it into some auto mode, and it's going to do some tricky spirally sort of cool thing. Now these are great and a lot of fun. Yeah, and here are some other neat things about these strips. So I'm just going to unplug that and put it over here. So that's another way to control it. So we're using an inline RF thing like this. And the other neat thing about these controllers is that they don't have to be in line of sight, which is really cool. So that's another way to control your RGB strip. Now you can cut these down. So you can see here what I've done is I've snipped these in between the LEDs. So you can make these any length you like, and you'll see in a minute that there's some reasons that we need to tell it what length that it is. So there you go. So you can chop these to different lengths, which when you're making light painting tools is quite important, right? I'll touch on this now just in case I forget. On these is an arrow. So you can see here there's an arrow and it's pointing in a direction. Now that arrow is pointing in the direction the data goes down the strip. So it's really important that you start at the end where the arrow is pointing. This way you stick all your data in that end. The reason it has connectors on both ends is so you can daisy chain them. Okay, so 5 volts, so we use a 3.7 volt 18650 battery. And the neat thing about these, right, is they're super compact, and because we're light painters, we tend to have shit tons of them lying around. And the main reason for that is that in 2024, around about now, 18650 batteries are super easy to get, and they're super cheap, and there's all sorts of amazing ways to hold them, control them, and all that sort of thing. Okay, so this is the big one for me. Here is the next way to control an RGB strip, and that is using Bluetooth. Now here is a controller, okay? This thing, I just bought a bunch of them quite a few years ago actually. So these are quite old, and I know that there are all sorts of awesome RGB, Bluetooth controllers now, but I like to use these ones because they work and they're very reliable. So let's have a look at how they go. So I've got a strip here. Now this is one length, and these are 144 LEDs a meter. So there are 144 LEDs in this strip. Again, we just put our Bluetooth controller in line. So I'm just plugging that into the strip. There it is. And on here is a QR code. And you scan that, and you get your app. Okay, now I'm just going to lay this out here so you can see that is running now. Now it's only running because the last time I used the controller, I turned it on. Through the wonders of modern science, I'm going to start recording my screen, so I can now open the app, and the app just comes from the QR code. It's called LED hue. So I open that up. I connect to the. Now here's an interesting thing. On the screen at the bottom here, it's got 191. You can tell it how many LEDs there are for the purpose of control, and I'll show you how that works. So at the moment it's got 191. I have no idea why. If I put 20 into there and go OK, well, look what happens. All of a sudden, only the first 20 are going. And then I can go, say 50, okay? And there's the 50, but there's 144 LEDs in this strip. So I'm going to tell it 144. okay? And then it starts going all the way to the end. Now the neat thing about this app, okay, and this is not the smartest app in the world. I know there are better ones, and we're going to talk in a minute about another very cool thing. But watch this. This one has about 4 billion pre-programmed presets. So I'm just going to start scrolling through them, and you'll be able to see that we just start getting all sorts of different patterns, right? Which is pretty neat. Or we can put it on auto, and it will just start going through, scrolling through different patterns. Now what I'm going to do while this is happening is you can control the brightness. So I'm going to dim it all the way down. So that's super dim down there. We'll keep it bright because we like bright. And then we can control the speed. So I'm going to slow the effect all the way down there. Look at that. So it's slowed right down. And then I'm going to speed it back up because we like fast. Now you can just put it onto regular colors, solid colors like this, or you can make DIY. So I can scroll through now, and we can pick a color and leave it on there. Look at that. And then we can adjust the brightness and so on. So these apps are really neat. And as you'll see in a minute, we've told the controller here, I'm just going to put it back onto auto because we like that. So we've told the controller what program basically to load into the RGB strip. And in effect, in reality, we can just leave that there now, and it will just keep going. So how does this work for us as light painters? Well, there are a myriad of different ways that we can now use this strip to make a light painting tool. Oh, actually, that's a good point. Here's another strip, and here's a way that we can use it as a tool, right? So here is an RGB strip, and these are 50/50s, so that means they're 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters, right? So here is an RGB strip that I've inserted into a rubber light. These are the things I use in light bars. There's all sorts of different types of diffusion. Look at all these. So these are all different types of diffusion material here. Look at that. Now you can, I know this is super bright, so it's going to be blowing out, but that's all right. But you can see how the LEDs coming out the end here are quite sharp and clear, and then the ones that are going through the strip are nice and diffuse. And you could use this for some amazing things. This would make an amazing tool if you stuck it on a bar and you just wanted to be making really nice patterns that are a bit softer and a bit diffuse. Yeah, so that is diffusion, and you stick this sort of stuff is super easy, but you put the RGBs up through there. But yeah, I just wanted to show you how look how unimaginably tiny that RGB strip is. I'll show you in comparison to this one. Let's put it next to each other. And of course, as always, with all this stuff, I'll be putting stuff on the screen as to what the actual term of these are. Look at that. So those are RGB strips, and they're super bright. Cool. So that's another type of RGB strip, and I love those so much. We're going to talk about some different ideas for tools. Maybe 2011, 2010, I had this idea of how to use LED strips, and back then it was all white for me, and I got this white strip and I stuck it on a bar and I put some power on it. I went out and I made some images. I loved it. It was so simple, so easy to use. It was a bit fun, it was different. I mean, there wasn't a lot of this stuff going on. And this is an RGB version of that. So if I turn this on, if I press this, there's a button here, right? If I press this, it turns on. And if I turn the button off, it turns off, right? And then the idea is that because of the shape of it, when you move it, you get all sorts of different beautiful patterns and shapes. And I'll show you how it's built. So what we have is, it's all 3D printed. So we have this 3D printed part here. There's the 18650 battery in here, and all the wiring is inside here. So I've taken this case off, and inside there is one of these Bluetooth controllers. So I've designed it, it just sits inside there. And I've put this hose on here. Yeah, you can buy this RGB strip that has a waterproof housing on it. So you can see it's got a rubber housing on there. And that is a great way to have just natural protection on here if we're using them for a tool, right? But if we're breaking them apart and adding, so this one that I've made in my light bow here is longer than 144. So I've put a join in up here. So I've put a join in here. So it's a little bit longer. So I've put this clear, I think it's designed for irrigation. I've put this clear stuff over the top of it to protect it. But this is a really, really, really cool tool. I love it. It's strong, it's robust. You can knock it around a bit. It's quite strong. And what we're going to do, I've decided, is in the next video, is we're going to actually build one of these. Yeah, which is pretty neat. And this one, you don't need any 3D printing. It is completely super simple to make. Yeah, and you'll have your own RGB light bow. All right, now while we're talking about tools, I want to show you something amazing. I have a very good friend, Lotte, who loves making spirographs, and spirographs are hanging a light from a string and spinning the light while you're looking from underneath. And when she mentioned that to me, and I knew I was making an RGB tutorial, I built this. Now the idea behind the tool was to be able to suspend, like you do with a spirograph, some RGB lights, spin them and control them. So here's what we did. So we've just seen how we control these strips, and I want to show you how we can cut them. So what I've done here is, if you think about the circuit as such, here's the control line coming down into the strip here, and you can see the light that comes around here, and then I just join them through, making sure we've got the arrows going in the right direction, and we come around and we come to the end. And then I 3D printed some bits to be able to suspend it from, because we want to suspend it. But here's the idea that I had, and the idea is that I put this switch in here, and if I turn the switch without touching it, we've got our RGB lights working on the back there. And the idea is that in this mode, it is suspended, right? And then you can do your spiro. So you send it spinning, and as it's turning, as you do with spiro, you get different patterns, right? So it's spinning and the lights are going. But what I thought would be great is for Lotte to have the ability to not, is that when she's not using it there, is to actually use it as a light painting tool. So I designed the rig here so that it's got a handle on it and a button. And so if I flick, so with the switch this way, it's in spiro mode, we'll call it. And then if you flick the switch, it turns it off. But when I press this button, it goes. And so imagine this as a light painting tool in the dark. That'd be a bit of fun. So it's a dual purpose light painting tool and spiro rig. So I thought that was pretty neat. And Lotte and I are going to go into the studio and make some spiro stuff with this. But here is a great example of how we can make really nice light painting tools using RGB LEDs. Now, as always, it's really important to think about this. Although I have a 3D printer and I have the ability to design stuff like this, you could make this up with bits of wood and glue and screws or whatever you like. It doesn't have to be fancy 3D printed. All right, let's have a look at another way that RGB strips are used in light painting tools. This is important. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Way back, I want to say 2010, the absolute legend that is Michael Ross on Flickr designed a tool that used addressable RGB LEDs that you put a program in and you move it through the frame and it creates an image. I have this burning memory of, I want to say, Pac-Man. So he made this Pac-Man image with it might have been him or his son shooting it. This is a long time ago. But Michael Ross invented the addressable RGB light painting stick. It then turned into the pixel stick. And then this thing, this is how they work. I never had a pixel stick. I thought they were a bit odd, but this got sent to me and I'll show you how it works. So what it is, there's a computer in here. So in here is some sort of computer. You power it. Of course, I'm powering it externally. Now what you do is on the screen here, you go in and basically you select a file. Now I'm going to, there's a thing here called fire. You go okay, and then you select fire and you go okay, and then oh yeah, there we go. So if you look at that, so it's flicker, oh, it's stopped. Let's go again. Okay, so see how it's moving. We got flickering lights there. Now if I press this button, right, and I'll just tighten this down. So if I press go, and then I move this across the screen like that, in an exposure, you're going to see fire. That'll probably go in the bag and never come out again. Yeah, so you know there are other people making stuff using those things. My friend John Mitchell, he makes a product that uses those. But yeah, they're a bit of fun. So in the next video, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start making a few tools with RGB, and they're going to be great. Some of the tools that we're going to make are, here's something that I just decided we're going to do. So calligraphy, right? So making calligraphy, the ability just nice little shapes. We're going to build something like that, just with some little cheap bits. We're going to put an RGB strip on here, and we're going to, so the idea is we're just going to put an RGB strip on there with a button. So we'll make that in a video. We're going to make ourselves a light bow. And the idea is I just want to make them super simple, super cheap, super easy with basic stuff. Oh, the other thing we're going to do, I know it's not RGB, but we're going to make a white light bow. We talked about this stuff in the original video. So this is flexible white white LED on a strip, and we're going to make a light bow with that. And this is interesting because this is 12 volts, so we need 12 volts to run that. So there you go. Woo! RGB strip. It's a lot of fun. Now, here's something I'm going to do, and this is only something I've decided in the last couple of days. I am very honest about the fact that I'm pretty thick. And I've had a crack in the past at this, but I was at the electronics shop the other day, and the legend that was there was asking me what the heck I was making with all the stuff I was buying. And he convinced me to have a go. Here it is. He convinced me to have a go at doing this. So this here, he asked me if I had ever experimented with building a tool where I can actually design the addressable LED. So what that means is take a 144 LED strip like this and say, I want chip 1 to 4 to be this color, that to this color, that brightness, or this or that. And I said I hadn't, and he suggested to me that it's idiot proof. So I purchased, look at that, how terrifying is that? Here is a circuit board. I'm going to build a tool. This is my challenge to myself. I'm going to build a tool and show you how to build a tool where we connect to this and we can design our own RGB strip, and somehow I'm going to design some tool where we build that, and I'm going to try and do it as cheap and as easy as possible. There's an app he was telling me, I think it's called WLED or something LED, that you use to power these things. I'm going to have a go. Unfortunately, it means connecting to a computer. He says there's no code. I find that hard to believe. So I'm going to have a crack at that. So that's something we're going to do in a little while. Anyway, I'll see you in a minute. See you in the next video. I'm going to head off now and gather some tools together, and we're going to make a light bow. See you in a minute. Peace.